symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good, Conrad. It's been a great week, and all my favorite fronts, the AEW front, the football front, it's all good. So it's been, everything's cool. I've been here in Oklahoma, and I'm getting ready to head back on the road and go back to Jacksonville soon. So and also, just for everybody's safety, because we don't hurt any snowflakes out there, I greased my chair. See? Don't hear nothing.
You know what's funny is before we clicked record a couple episodes ago, I said, hey, just so you know, I'm fine with it, but we're going to hear about that damn chair squeaking.
Yeah, you're right. It's amazing, man. People taking time out of their day to complain about a squeaky chair.
Yeah.
But hey, we shouldn't be surprised anymore. Everybody's outspoken. Everybody's a little defiant. You know, that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
It's not just pro wrestling; it's everything. The politicians get the same shit. So, and they deserve it. By gosh, I don't deserve squeaky chair complaints. Come on, help me out.
I'm pumped about why we're here today, and we hope you guys last night were tuned into TNT. Of course, Jim and I are recording this before because last night we all know he was ringside at Arthur Ashe Stadium for arguably the biggest moment in AEW history.
Right.
The New York debut sold out, I'm sure, nearly 20,000 fans, if not more, I'm sure. And a dream match on every front. As we had Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson. Again, we're taping this ahead of that. We'll give you a little bit of a recap of what we thought next week here on the show, but
right.
It's a function of we drop at 6 a.m. and you just finished watching it last night live. So here we are, but man, are you pumped to be in New York with AEW? This is a big time show.
Yeah. It's a big step for us, big step forward, I think. And something that, Tony Khan and the team have been building for quite some time to prepare for that. I know when we booked the venue, I wasn't concerned in a negative way. I just didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
I'd never been in that facility before in my life. I'm probably not the world's greatest tennis aficionado, but I did catch it the US Open this year just to see what the arena looked like with people in it. And it's as the fans that watched, it was pretty impressive. So it's good win for the team. Everybody's happy, I think, and I sure was proud to be a part of that presentation. It brought back a lot of real cool memories of, you know, passion and all the signs and all the masses of people and to see their enthusiasm, and more importantly for me to hear their enthusiasm was just the medicine that we all needed. So it was good stuff, man. It was good stuff. So it just shows you what happens when you work your ass off and you're with a company that's very upwardly mobile. And, you know, Tony Khan has proven that he has a great taste and talent by the acquisitions that he's made. So I'm really excited about the future because the dream match pairings, the potential dream match pairings with our roster now, Conrad, without breaking my arm, patting myself on the back for our company, it's unlimited. There's just going to be so many dream matches, you know, because you can only imagine. Gosh, can you imagine CM Punk and Bryan Danielson, or CM Punk and Kenny Omega, and then you got Adam Cole now, and you know, golly, all these Moxley. Those pairings it's just endless. And they're matches that when you talk about them, that excites me because you know the potential of those darn things. And I think all those guys seemingly, at least unless I'm so naive, I'm just missing everything. They respect each other and they want to work with each other. So I'm really happy for our future and what all we're doing, and it's fun stuff. So then this show here today is going to be interesting because this is one of those shows where the card was okay. it was during this alliance time period, and that was not the happiest of times because there was so much indecision and misstepping and this, that, and the other, however you want to call it. It underdelivered for the roster that we had and the potential of the alliance versus WWE and all that good stuff, to the point that they were serious about it because they made Austin the leader of the alliance. But I think that match was one that Austin versus Kurt for the title was really show saver. Not that the show was going to bomb, but that match was so damn good that it made everything else pale by comparison. So, but you look up and down the card, I was reading all the notes and stuff, and boy, we had a lot of good talent on on this show here, especially. We had so much talent that I don't know that we all knew what to do with it, to be honest with you, and which direction to go. And so I think sometimes the WWE bias of not wanting to create too much attention to another brand was I say harmful. It was cumbersome. But anyway, the show was good. It was a fun show because I remember Jan and I being there and being in Pittsburgh, her hometown, and she always loved those shows she could go to, and it was an historic igloo. So good stuff all the way around. So we'll have fun doing this show today, folks, and we're glad that you tuned in and continue to support our efforts. We couldn't do this without you. So we're going to try to entertain the hell out of you today and maybe inform you a little bit as well. We'll see.
Well, it's all about it. Unforgiven 2001. Here we are at the 20-year anniversary. We just recently covered the 20-year anniversary of the 9/11 SmackDown, and we only have a handful of days before we're here to this pay-per-view. Man, just the mood 20 years ago in America was different. And I'm sure that resonated with this crew that's really zigzagging across the nation by air travel. Things had to be just, it felt a little different here, did it not?
Yeah, it's like having a bad hangover. You wonder when you're going to get the cobwebs out, when you're back to normal. And I think that's kind of what that was. And I'll say this, the company and the talent, we all came together. And people might laugh at that. Oh, it's just that fake wrestling stuff. But, it's still you're dealing with human beings and feelings. And many had losses in the 9/11 tragedies, both towers and all that stuff. So, yeah, it was the most unique time that I can ever remember in my career because of 9/11. And I think it motivated a lot of people. Let's go out and get this stuff behind us and put on a hell of a show tonight. And you'll see during the show, if you're watching along or if you've not, or you're going to watch it, great effort. There was great effort in this show. But the Angle Austin match was about as good a main event as we had in a long, long time on this broadcast.
Let's add some context to what we're talking about. This show is happening 13 or less than 2 weeks after 9/11. So just a handful of days after. And there's a lot of moving parts inside the company as well as just America. Let's jump into something that it was in the Observer.
Okay.
Lawler wrote an internet post saying he recently talked with both Bruce Pritchard as an attempt to mend fences and Jim Ross, who he's always gotten along with, to try and set the stage for a return. Ross's advice to him was to get the divorce completely behind him first, so he'd be mentally 100%. And at that point, try and work things out with Vince. Of course, we know Lawler comes back in November. For this show in particular, Paul Heyman still has the slot. What do you remember about where King was and how he was trying to get things turned around?
Well, I think he realized at that point, not that he might've made a mistake, that he could have not quit. He could have just said, I need some time off, and Vince would have given the time off just like that. No problem. But, he was a little defiant, and he was standing up for his soon to be ex-wife. And so it was just a unique time. And I'm glad that he finally, it all got worked out. But in the meantime, I was having a hell of a lot of fun working with Heyman. Paul's really good, and he brings out a different side of me, and he's very combative and argumentative and so forth, much more so than Jerry and I were together. We might have been a little bit more adversarial in the beginning, but then as time went on, we got so comfortable with each other. I don't think the fans wanted that. I think they wanted to see JR and King coexist and have fun and bring us a good show. But it was a really unique time for me. But luckily we had Heyman, and he always came through on these broadcasts, and this one was no different.
The air travel is something that's also going to make the observer. Billy Silverman, who was working as a WCW ref, quit, I believe, on September 2nd after a flight from Halifax to Toronto. Silverman had been ribbed unmercifully since he upgraded himself to first class. He was told if he brought beers for everyone on the flight, everyone would let it go, but somehow he didn't buy enough beers and was still getting ribbed. And when he landed, he quit. Now that sounds silly, but it's considered a sign of arrogance to upgrade yourself, because first class is for only people who've made it to the top in the WWF. Although in WCW, they had no such unwritten rule of conduct, and anyone could upgrade themselves. And Silverman didn't know that. Boy, this is unfortunate.
Yeah, I don't blame Billy Silverman for upgrading, and I don't think anybody else should have either. It just makes no sense. It was his money, or he used his status to upgrade. Whatever he used, cash or points, miles, what have you, was his business. And I didn't have any issue with it. I was a little, you'd think that after that plane ride from hell bullshit, that we would have, some of the guys had learned, but we had some guys on our roster that were kind of bullies, and they were very competitive. And I don't know what motivated them. I think that what motivated them is that they knew that Silverman was not going to fight back, and he was being bullied, and that was wrong. So, and Billy did a nice job as a referee, and he always did. But that was unnecessary. And I was sorry. He was a good referee, as a matter of fact, Conrad. And, and you lose a piece out of your toolbox, so to speak. And the referees are so damn important to the execution and performance of a match and how it's perceived. But Billy did a nice job. And again, it's just, I'm disappointed again. And guys taking their antics too far. It's easy to say, hey, look, we'll let you off the hook, as if, what are you going to do if we don't? You're going to continue to rib him? You're going to rib him anyway. And so I don't know. I thought it was unnecessary, but Billy, I always felt badly about that scenario. But what are you going to do? And the guy, if he would have come to us when he landed and would have expressed himself, but that was no option. He's gone. He quit. So I don't know. And some people are going to take exception to that. What are you going to do? You should have found him, should have brought him back. But quite frankly, at that time, it probably was better for him to take a little bit of a sabbatical, considering this whole scenario. Because I'm sure that a plane ride from this plane probably was not a huge jet. So the seating was tight. We had a lot of big guys, and I'm sure first class was full. And and if guys wanted to ride in first that didn't get a ticket for it, they could have done like Billy Silverman, upgrade. Ain't gonna hurt you. You got the money, do it.
So we're back on track for the Unforgiven show itself. The show scheduled for Pittsburgh, which of course is Kurt Angle's hometown. We recently covered the main event over on Kurt Angle's show. So be sure to check that out. But the card is shaping up as Austin versus Angle for the title, Rock versus Booker and Shane McMahon for the WCW title. That's silly. Rob Van Dam versus Jericho for the hardcore title, Undertaker and Kane versus Chronic for the WCW titles, and Edge and Christian for the Intercontinental as the top matches. This is like maybe the most stacked roster ever here. I mean, it certainly feels that way from the outside. I mean, goodness gracious.
Yeah, I had a lot of confidence in this roster. I think everybody else did too. A lot of really good talents. As we go through the card today and how this Unforgiven show in 2001 went down, you're going to see a lot of Hall of Fame talent and a lot of rich guys that got wealthy through that period of time. So yeah, it was a unique, as I said earlier, probably the most unique time in my career because of all the, we acquired all these talents, and there's no way in hell on one show that we could use everybody. I mean, it's impossible. Maybe if there's any reason to do a 3-hour show, which I would despise. I still think it's not necessary, but in any event, there's just no way in a 2-hour show you get enough coverage for everybody to quote unquote get over. So in any event, it was a lot of talents were upset. They were thinking that the pushes were tough. You got the top spots are locked up. God dang, Conrad, we had Rock and Austin. What are you going to do? Put them in the first match? You can't. They're two of the biggest stars in the history of the business that were drawing money more often than not and selling a lot of merchandise. But our product right at that time should have been a lot hotter than it was. And I can't give you a valid and logical explanation as to why it wasn't. It might have been we're trying to spread too many too thin. I'm not sure. But we still had our core stars, and again, like I said, when you're blessed with 2 stars like Austin and Rock, and you still got Undertaker, you still got Kurt, we're still doing good. Now, the guys that had concerns about that were the ones that were wrestling below them on the card because they wanted to move up the card and get that big main event money. And that was going to be tough sledding. So it was, like I said, unique to say the least in that era.
Let's also mention that Chronic is not going to be long for this world. Let's talk about them for a minute. Did they come into the company based on Undertaker's relationship with Brian Clark and Brian Adams?
I sure to some degree, yes, to some degree. It's much like when I hired Mick Foley to go around the house shows looking to get one run out of him because I needed an opponent for the Undertaker. And I patterned that after the old NBA West with when people were trying to defend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they had to find a defensive center that could match up with him and pair up with him. And I think that's kind of what we're looking for with Undertaker. We need somebody to match up with him and pair up with him and give him a new opponent until others got ready. And little did we know that Mick is going to become such a great star. I think that's where we are here. You had Undertaker and Kane as a team, very imposing, to say the least. Size, reputation, ring style, very heavy-handed, very physical, and they needed opponents. And I think Taker, I don't quote, you got to quote me because I'm going to say it. I think Taker probably went to Vince and said, hey, look, I got an idea. And Vince is really good about the top guys. We talked about Austin turning heel. And Vince said, well, we owe it to him to try it. And so that's kind of what we did. We went along with Taker's suggestion and hired both those guys. Unfortunately, they just didn't have the it thing. It's hard. You can't smell it. You can't touch it. You can feel it. But, and both those guys are decent guys. There's nothing wrong with them on a human level. They just, as stars working with 2 of our biggest stars, literally and figuratively, just didn't have the sizzle that it was going to take to turn heads and draw money on a consistent basis in this particular marriage. But Taker did have something to do with it, and to his credit, he believed in those guys. It's just that they just didn't close the deal, and it's unfortunate.
So let's talk about the Raw after Houston. Of course, that was the SmackDown we just recently covered. The Dudleys would defeat Undertaker and Kane with help from Chronic to win the WWF tag titles. Terry and Raven would put Moppy in a wood chipper. It's a real high point for creative. Hurricane is matched up with Molly Holly as his new sidekick, and Taz loses to Shane and Booker T. So you assume that Taz is out of the alliance, but we'll get to that later. The final 2 matches are what I really want to talk about. Test and Stephanie McMahon defeat The Rock in 8 minutes and 41 seconds in a handicap match. Here's the write-up from Dave. The Rock used the rock bottom on Test, but Stephanie distracted heel referee Nick Patrick. Rock gave Patrick the rock bottom. Rock hip tossed Stephanie in, and Booker and Shane ran in and ended up with Shane, Booker, and Test all destroying The Rock including Test giving him the kick of death, Booker giving him the axe kick, and Shane with an elbow off the top, Booker with the bookend, and finally Stephanie just stepped on Rock as Patrick counted the pin. So you're talking about the second biggest babyface in the company. He's on his path to becoming the biggest movie star. And here's Stephanie McMahon putting a foot on him to pin him a week before he's about to wrestle Booker and Shane in a handicap match for the singles title. What do you think of this creative?
Well, I think the company went out of its way to give Rock plenty of outs. It took multiple people to beat him. I think that was probably the message that Heyman and I were trying to get across, is that the odds were deeply stacked against the Rock. So it gave your heroic babyface a chance to have an out and not bitch about it, but let the announcers outline what the hand that was dealt meant. So did I like I'm not big on these handicap things, just for the sake of having a handicap match.
Yeah.
Be honest with you. But I think that if you're going to do it, you got to make sure that the handicap side of the equation is effective, or all other handicap matches are not going to mean shit. So I think that's the idea. But, hey, I would have been just as happy to see a Rock versus Booker T match. To me, that would have been a hell of a one-on-one match. But the handicap aspect of this whole little program was questionable, how I'd put it.
The main event that night on that very same Raw is also pretty interesting. You see Jericho and Angle over Austin and Van Dam in 8 minutes and 21 seconds. Meltzer would say really good, reminiscent of the days in the first few months of the year when most TV main events were kick-ass matches, good action and real heat. They did one spot where Van Dam kicked Austin for the long-term tease, then a referee bump, and then everyone seemed to get their finishers on with no referee. Ankle lock on Austin, Van Dam saved. Jericho with walls on Van Dam, Austin saved. Austin hit Jericho with the ring bell, went to hit Angle, but Earl Hebner grabbed the bell from him. Angle got near falls with a schoolboy and a German suplex before finally hitting the ankle slam after a block stunner for the pin. Pretty much common sense booking to build the pay-per-view. And here's the line. Nobody will ever admit this publicly in the WWF, but they have to be disappointed that Angle wasn't far more over, as they've given him the Hogan / Slaughter / Duggan Patriot role when patriotism is suddenly the hot thing. I don't know. It feels like, we're going to watch the pay-per-view in a minute. I'm even going to play a clip of the finish. The fans are super hot for him. And maybe that's because it's in his hometown.
That helped.
But still, he is the Olympic hero, and he has been, I guess sort of the modern patriot voice of WWE because he's always talking about America. I can't imagine you guys were disappointed, but you were there. What say you?
I wasn't disappointed at all. I thought the crowd bought it. It sounded good on TV. It looked good on TV. Again, if you're going to compare Kurt as a babyface to Austin and Rock as baby faces, he probably was number 3. And Austin was allegedly supposed to be a heel at that time. And that never worked. So I'm not so sure that everybody in the arena who have been following WWE for quite some time were ready to bail on Austin. So so there's a little bit of a mixed crowd, even though Kurt was at home, hometown hero, big chance to become the champion in there where he grew up. Good formula. So I wasn't disappointed in it at all. And I thought that their match was outstanding. Just really, really freaking good.
Kid Cash gets a tryout at SmackDown the next day, but doesn't sign with the company for almost 5 years later.
You want to think about it.
Well, what do you think it was about David Cash that kept him from being on the WWE roster at the time? I mean, fresh off of a pretty good ECW run, was he just not the right quote unquote size that Vince was looking for, or was it something else?
Well, his size didn't do him any favors as far as the Vince decision was concerned. And I think that he was always perceived, and it may be because of his tenure in ECW. I don't know that. That's going to sound like me knocking ECW, and I'm not. We got some great recruits out of there. We signed a lot of good people out of there without question, and a lot of them on his card. I just don't think that he was ever perceived as anything more than a preliminary guy, mid card guy type thing. Was he fundamentally sound? Hell yeah, very much so. Good talent, but was there something really extraordinarily special about him at that time? Not really. And so he was not a high priority to sign. If he had been a high priority to sign, I would have signed him. But that was not my directive.
Let's talk about the Memphis SmackDown, September 18th. It's the go home SmackDown. You're doing the show with Michael Cole. I bring that up because it's sort of a weird announcer shuffle. You know, you had been primarily working with Paul Heyman on Raw. Michael Cole was doing his thing on SmackDown, but you're doing this show with Michael Cole. Why do you think the shuffle happened here?
Well, I'm trying to think what was Heyman's availability or not. I don't understand.
Think it was because we sort of dedicated a week of our pay-per-view build, meaning normally we're selling the pay-per-view, selling every Raw, every SmackDown. But now this SmackDown after 9/11 really just became a tribute show. So we sort of drop all of our storylines and salesmanship, if you will.
Right.
You know how to sell the pay-per-view better than anybody. Do you think there's a chance that Vince just thought, hey, if I want to have somebody sort of hard sell this thing for me, I need JR?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, probably. We needed to sell, as you said. We need to sell some mortgages. And that's kind of what we did. But I guess it was, I guess that was a period of time where Vince liked me. and of course, and Heyman and I did a decent job according to what people thought on the Houston 9/11 show. But I guess that would be it, Conrad. I don't know of any other reason other than we needed to just sell this pay-per-view in a positive way and not be combative. And it wasn't time to bringing Lawler back would have been great. But that deal had not come full circle yet. But I guess that's what it was, just to sell the pay-per-view, because I hadn't even thought of that until you brought it up. It's a good point.
There's a weird angle on this show. Tajiri and Tori Wilson are put together as love interests. And here's the Meltzer recap. SmackDown opened with an Austin interview and he called out Wilson. Austin runs her down, makes her cry, and he's yelling at her for being with Tajiri. Austin makes her cry some more until Tajiri comes in for the save, but Austin destroys him. Austin threatens to go after Wilson. And when Angle that's when Angle comes out. Angle starts destroying Austin when Taz comes out, and guess what? Attacks Angle and not Austin. Seriously, these constant repeated booking ideas where they turn people on one show and it's all a swerve will kill them almost as fast as the word WCW. Angle laid out Taz, allowing Austin to post Angle and nail him with some chair shots, and pile drives Angle on the floor twice. Angle does a stretcher job here where he's saying he's not feeling his arms. I think he has a point here. It feels like, Taz was defeated and beaten by Booker and Shane on the Raw before. It does feel like that was set up just to be a swerve. Like they're flip-flopping Taz sort of back and forth. Is he with us? Is he against us? Mm-hmm. Did they just not have good creative with Taz, or was the surprise element paramount in WWE at the time?
I don't think that collectively the group, primarily creative, had the feel for Taz that we wish they had. I wish they had. I don't know that we ever did great creative with Taz. And I know his debut, ironically, in the Garden was against Kurt Angle. So, and I thought at that point Taz was very hot, and we could all see that people connected to him. And I understand it was in the Garden. He's from, Brooklyn and all that stuff, Red Hook. But I don't know. I just don't think we ever did Taz justice in the creative wise. And then soon thereafter, not too long after, I may be getting my dates mixed up, he got hurt. And that kind of shut that down. Taz was not a popular hire by me by some of those in the company, simply because he was under 6 feet, and he had a very no sell type style, and all that crap. So, but I don't think we ever did Taz justice, quite frankly. And I think this whole angle, not just for Taz, but for a lot of people, it was just confusing. Who's on, who's playing, who's on first,
Right.
Who's on second. So type deal. So Taz was a victim of that, but so are others. But I thought we never got the mileage out of Taz that we could have gotten out of him if he had not got injured and he got back on a roll. None of that ever happened. And that's just, I really regret that, because anytime you hire a guy and you expect him to be a top hand, and Taz should have been a top hand. It was just a matter of, politics and things of that nature. Just reared their ugly head, and him being 5'8" or 5'9", wherever Taz is. I'm sure he'll watch this show and correct me. I'm 5'10". You're not 5'10". It don't matter. It doesn't matter. But I like Taz. I wouldn't have hired him if I didn't think he had something. And then subsequently, he got injured, as we said, and that derailed everything. It gave everybody an excuse not to go with him, because he's injury prone type deal. And I thought that was very unfair.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah, you're definitely going to have a conversation.
No problem. I talk. Taz and I have great conversations behind the scenes at AEW all the time. Sometimes they're pretty damn entertaining. But nonetheless, I'm sure we will have a chat.
Let's also mention this Kurt Angle stretcher job. That's the larger issue here. Couple of pile drivers on the exposed concrete, stretchers out. I can't feel my arms. It's a real looking scene, but unbelievably, he comes back later in the night. And I understand that this was probably not the original plan. And nobody's told me that, but again, we just mentioned, we have a SmackDown where we're just doing a tribute show. We're not really sell for the pay-per-view because of 9/11, which I get, right call. We celebrated that show a few weeks ago, but all right, I'm out on a stretcher. I can't feel my arms. You pile drove me twice on the concrete today,
which was unnecessary too, Connor. Excuse me for interrupting you, but one pile driver on the concrete from a guy that has suffered a broken frigging neck and still won the Olympic gold medal should have been sufficient. And the other thing, as we all know, common sense played in a little bit. If it had been used, he would have been off for several weeks.
Yes.
But the Unforgiven card was already booked. So this was all leading to that. But I thought 2 pile drivers was excessive. And I thought that him coming back later in that night was kind of, it flew a little bit in the face of common sense, in my opinion, looking back at it.
It's a little rushed, and it feels like if the SmackDown wouldn't have been a tribute show, then maybe they would have done this pile driver angle and he would have come back another week or two, whatever. We could have stretched it out.
Right.
But when that runway gets shortened, we stick with the same creative, even if it means the return is less than 2 hours later. That feels silly.
Panicking.
Yes.
It was panicking, I think. In my view, and without a doubt, it was too quick. That has nothing to do, with Kurt Angle. I love Kurt Angle to this very day. He's a freak of nature, and he still is to some degree at his age. But I think there was a lot of chaos and uncertainty, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and sometimes in the last guy Vince talked to left their impression of this whole scenario. And I think there was, like I said, just in Vince's mind and those in his inner circle, we weren't sure where we were going. And if the boss can't tell you where we're going, not just 1 or 2 people are lost, everybody's lost. So, and I think we were in a little wasteland right there creatively.
Let's mention that we've got a main event that is going to get the Rock's quote unquote heat back. It's Rock and APA on one side, Booker Test and Rhyno on the other side. It's an elimination match. Shane's going to hit Bradshaw with a chair and Booker pins him with the scissors kick. Farouk goes next after a gore. and the kick of death from Test. So now it's Rock against all three guys. He's going to DDT Rhyno for the pin, rock bottom on Test for the pin. So now it's Rock and Booker left, and Booker just simply walks off for the count out loss. Big comeback for the Rock here, but it does feel like, I don't know, this is less than peak WWE creative. How much of this was disrupted because of the tribute episode, and how much of it was, hey, creatives just burn out?
No, I thought the latter. I don't think your previous question about the tribute show was a major issue here, just in my opinion. But I think it was just confusion and uncertainty of where our direction was. You know, Vince was always amazing at establishing a direction, and more importantly, Conrad, establishing a destination. We're gonna do this angle because I got it booked for WrestleMania or whatever it may be, whatever show it is, some destination. And so we all knew what the destination was. Now now we could all do our respective jobs in that same spirit. And there were times, going on the air that, we didn't really know. So it's hard to call a match when you don't know where you're headed.
Let's also mention, as we start to build towards the show, we have a special little cameo appearance here on SmackDown. Jerry Lee Lewis is at SmackDown.
Right.
And The Rock is going to sing Great Balls of Fire with him. And he's going to ask him if he likes pie. And of course, Lewis says that he likes poontang pie. Any memories of meeting the killer, Jerry Lee Lewis?
Oh yeah, man. He was cool as hell. It's still cool. Had that swag about him. And he was still, he lived his gimmick. And he lived his gimmick backstage with cameras or no cameras. So he was just being Jerry Lee. And, Jerry Lee was a wild child. That was his reputation, especially for a guy that was cousins to, Jimmy Swaggart and so somebody like that. But Jerry was the wild card of the crew, of the family, I should say. But it was kind of cool him being there. And Conrad, he had fun. Entertainers are generally like enjoying other entertainers. And Jerry liked being around all of our guys. Of course, everybody came up to him and treated him like he was Elvis. No pun intended here, but same town. But he was cool as hell. He was a fun guy to be around. And I saw him on TV just not too long ago, a little birthday celebration, and you could tell he slipped him a lot. But he was fun as hell to meet that night. He was one of my musical heroes. He always had those great. He had great head. He had charisma, man. He had what Chronic didn't have. He had charisma.
It's reported that Lawler was at the Memphis SmackDown because of course he is. Meltzer would write, it was not a surprise Lawler was there, as his friends in the company, most notably Jim Ross, were hoping he would be there to at least start the ball rolling for everyone, trying to soothe a lot of the bitter feelings from the way he left, and also not coming back on July 2nd after a deal was nearly finalized. Not to mention that he had, in the opinion of many in the WWF, crossed the line by how public he had made the situation in portraying himself so strongly as the babyface. Mm-hmm. Lawler, in making amends to people, basically told people that he now understands why the company fired Stacey Carter and that he made a mistake because he wasn't fully apprised of the reasons, and that's why he defended her. Ross told him that he needs to finalize his divorce before considering coming back, as mentioned last week. It looks like it's going to be a messy divorce he's going through, and they would rather he returned with a clear head and without constant hearings to deal with that could get into his work schedule.
Correct.
What do you remember about Lawler showing up at SmackDown here? Did he have a chance to sit down with Vince or Bruce and sort of clear the air in person?
I don't know that, I'm assuming he had an audience with Vince, because in all due respect to Bruce couldn't solve his problems, and neither could I. There's only one guy that could pull the trigger.
Well, I'm just saying that about Bruce because I know he went on a radio show and insinuated that Bruce was having relations with Stephanie. And we know that was not true.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. He went on Man Cow's radio show in Chicago and Of course, in real life, Bruce is married to a Stephanie, just not that Stephanie.
Yeah.
And when
little details, Conrad. See, you let the goddamn facts get in the way of a good story.
No, that was the insinuation that that Bruce. I mean, he didn't outright say it, but he said, "Oh, you'd have to ask." I think Mancow said, "How do you think Stephanie McMahon is in the sack?" or something like that, because that's the type of stuff that Mancow would do.
Yeah.
And Lawler, maybe trying to be funny, maybe trying to be controversial, says, "Well, I hear you'd have to ask Bruce Pritchard." Now, he could sort of tongue in cheek say, "Well, I meant Stephanie Pritchard," but the insinuation was certainly that it was with McMahon. And so I understand that there was a need to, hey man, probably shouldn't have done that. And I don't think Bruce was upset about it long term once they actually talked, but I just know that that's the way it was. So I assume when JR knows, or you're JR, when Lawler comes in, he's like, hey, I need to talk to Bruce and I need to talk to Vince. And hopefully
I'm sure he did, Conrad.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he did. Like, I put my hand on the good book and swear, but I find it very unlikely that Jerry would be in the same building in Memphis, his hometown, and not take advantage of that opportunity, because he gets to save Trance, and Lawler can save a dime somewhere along the way. He's going to do that.
Good for him.
Yeah, no problem with that. Jerry that's one of Jerry's issues sometimes. He gets very public. He uses social media nowadays a lot in his social life, and that's his call. You know, I've never met his new girlfriend. Probably, I don't know if I will, because I don't see Jerry very often. And I saw him at your Top Guys function, which was fun as hell. I enjoyed talking. I'll always enjoy being around Jerry. We traveled too many miles together not to have a relationship. But I told him that, get your divorce, get past all the publicity involving your divorce, because knowing him and knowing the Memphis media, the King getting divorced is a story that they're going to follow, and it's going to get picked up, and it's going to be, shared around and all that stuff. Get that all behind you, so there's no issues to deal with whatsoever. You're clean, you're done, boom. And he's reluctant to take that advice at times. Just keep it calm and low key and let things settle. And so, but I feel real stupid if I said, oh, I don't think they talked. I just don't know how they wouldn't talk, quite frankly. And it may not have been a long conversation, but at least Vince saw Lawler's there, and he knew his intentions were good, and that, maybe enough time has gone by, enough water has gone under the bridge, et cetera, that things will be okay. But it was a little bit of a chore to get all that done, because some people love the controversy. Misery loves company sometimes, and I'm sure there were some that didn't have a problem with Jerry's consternation, and he loved that job. He would probably work for half the money just to wrestle than he would making really good money as a broadcaster, because he always perceived himself, and still does this very day in 2021, as a wrestler, not a broadcaster.
I want to ask, the world changed after 9/11, and at the time, it's weird, in hindsight now, I see where a lot of people would say, oh, that's not true. But at the time, people thought, hey, what is this going to mean? Like, what is this going to mean for the cost of gas for our automobiles? What is this going to mean for the stock market? What is this going to mean for our employment? What is this going to mean for mass gatherings?
Our safety?
Yes. Will people feel comfortable going to live events again? It was a weird deal. And you're plugged in, man, there in New York. Do you remember there being discussions of, hey, we may need to, tighten the budget a little bit because we can't forecast what our business is going to be. Everything's going to be different. We might need to get ahead of it and cut some costs. Were you having those type conversations?
Absolutely. I guess in a nutshell, what we were all wondering, is there another shoe to drop? And if so, when will that occur? Because obviously, America got caught with their pants down on those Twin Tower bombings, those planes running into those buildings. So nobody knew. It was so unpredictable, is what I'm trying to say. And so many hundreds and hundreds of people lost their lives. You wonder, well, who's next? And the antagonists, the terrorists that saw this, saw what an effect it had on the psyche and the morale and mindset, if you will, of the American public. So how could you not say, well, is it over? Are we safe? Are we in the clear? So, and then you had wives that you had to deal with. That was one thing about that we had to factor in was family. And some of the families were very concerned about their husband's welfare and so forth and so on. So I don't know. I just think it was very uncertain times, to say the very least.
Let's hit another topic here. You've got a conference call for the media on September 20th before the pay-per-view. And here's a recap of the Observer's recap of your call. From the Observer, seemed to praise Test, Booker, RVD, and Canyon on the WCW side of making strides. Others were praising Hurricane, and Ross was saying it had a ways to go. Didn't see anyone from developmental coming up to the majors by the end of the year, said one or two possibilities. Kind of said the upside is that everyone will have more ring time before their debuts. Noted that Jazz had signed a deal and would be going to OVW to work with Sharmell Sullivan and Victoria. Really praised Victoria for moving from California to Memphis and then Louisville for very little money. Ross talked that all three of them could be on WWF TV by the end of the year. Sullivan signing, I think, was largely a favorite of Booker. Wasn't committal on Mysterio Jr. or Guerrera, saying there was no spot for now for Guerrera, and praised Mysterio Jr.'s work, but was very tempered as far as hinting he'd be signed when available next year. Basic theme was current market makes it very difficult to break in. Said he's amazed at how well the ratings held up over the past week. Did say battle plan when the groups are split to have wrestlers exclusive to their one show, as opposed to guys working on both Raw and SmackDown. So the idea is eventually the brand split is going to be real, but I think once upon a time they thought it would be maybe more WCW, more ECW on one side and then more WWF on the other. But it's fascinating to think about, what could have been and what really did happen now with the benefit of hindsight.
Right.
I believe that Guerrera here is referencing Juventud. Why wasn't there any interest in Juventud? Just the out of the ring hygiene?
Exactly. Out of ring issues. And, you hope that somebody that has out of ring issues and that's communicated and they're aware of it will make some changes. Rey Mysterio, I didn't want to screw that deal up. Rey knew that we were going to hire him.
Yeah.
I met with Rey. We had a great meeting in LA at a live event. He came in, and I remember sitting under where the room was. It was an important meeting for me because I was a huge fan, still am, of Rey Mysterio's work and as a personality. But I couldn't pay him what WCW was guaranteeing him. I couldn't guarantee him the money. I thought we could make him more money, and we did, considerably more money. Rey with the merch and him being able to work with anybody, even at his size, he was just he was a major target. But he needed to let his contract run out. And I told him this, I said, Rey, for the first time, you're getting paid a lot of money. You're going to be able to sit home and draw your check and be with your family and not travel and heal up some of those old wounds, because he was a bump taker. You know how Rey was when he was young. One of the things he amazed people with is the bumps he took. So that's the conversation we had. I said, but we'll have a deal here, and I'll try to get as close to your number to make you comfortable. But you need to know our pay scale here is based on the house shows and the pay-per-view buys, and a lot of ancillary things that can't be guaranteed because we don't know how many tickets are going to sell, or we don't know how many pay-per-views are going to sell. So that's why I didn't go a lot of detail on Rey. I do remember that part of it. But, you try to give everybody a little bit of attaboy or attagirl, pat on the back, just like Victoria. She lived in California. And we're going to move you to Memphis. Oh, no, we're going to move you to Louisville. So she established residency in Memphis. That's a long trek. And then there's been a change in plans. You're going to go to Kentucky. and it's not quite California. It's not bad though, you know. So that's the deal. But I had forgotten all about that conference call until now. Who the hell's? I didn't see who all was on that call, but nonetheless, that's kind of where we were on that deal.
Let's talk about the Nature Boy. There were discussions between the WWF and Ric Flair around this time as well. Do you remember how that all came to be? I mean, we're a few months after WCW going down here. I'm sure he still had some time left on his contract, and maybe that was it. And as the story goes, when Rick is discussing coming back, it's, oh, you'll never wrestle. And of course, we know that didn't last very long. Do you remember having any conversations with Rick specifically about coming into the company here?
Well, you know, Conrad, Rick was always on a different level, and he earned that level. He was at the highest level. And guys that were at the highest level, like Hogan and Flair, and certainly Warrior, were handled by Vince. So I was not as involved in those conversations as I were with the entire rest of the roster. So I'm not sure how all that went down, but I know it was a conversation between Vince and Rick, and I just kept waiting on updates.
Let's talk about Unforgiven. We're finally here. It's in Pittsburgh. We're going to draw 13,855 fans to the Mellon Arena, which is 300 short of a sellout. 12,887 would pay $648,115 with another $100,158 in merchandise. Now, I'm not going to necessarily say this is a B show, but it's not SummerSlam. It's not the Royal Rumble. It's not WrestleMania. That's still pretty damn strong, is it not?
Yeah, that's good business. Business picked up that night in Pittsburgh, and not a bad night's work, quite frankly. So, but again, we had a great main event. We had the hometown guy challenging to win a title. All the basic scenario that we've done, fans that listen to this and watching this have seen before. All the cards on that main event fell into place, and it made that show a hot ticket. Austin versus Angle for the title. It wasn't a one match show, but that match definitively was the very best match on a card, and I think sold the tickets.
Let's talk about the pay-per-view. 570,000 buys was the number for SummerSlam. This is the follow-up effort, 350,000 buys, which I get from the outside. A lot of people would say, oh, that's down. And it is. But again, it's not SummerSlam. And put in context how many buys that would be today, Jim. 350,000 buys, boy, people would be doing cartwheels.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You know, our AEW's last pay-per-view, I never heard a final number. I only heard it was over 200,000.
Yeah.
And which is our best by far ever. So people are rejoicing about 200K. Here we're talking about it, like you said, it really wasn't a B show, but quite frankly, it wasn't an A show.
Yeah.
SummerSlam was the A show.
Right.
Then the next moving forward, you're going to have a little bit of a letdown, but because of the main event, it wasn't that big a drop off. It didn't disappear. Everybody still made money.
Let's jump into, the matches here. And I want to remind everybody, this is the last time Kurt Angle main events a WWF pay-per-view until WrestleMania 19 in 2003.
Wow.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that internally people thought, hey, the bloom is off the rose. He's not a Rock. He's not Austin. He's not the draw. I mean, I don't understand how you have the best wrestler in the world and it feels like he's getting huge reactions. I assume he's a needle mover. Have I been misled, or did you think the same thing? Cause it is weird. He doesn't main event again until Mania 19.
The only thing, Conrad, all these years later that I would assume it had something to do with, his health, his neck, and other issues that would affect the reliability factor. But Kurt was the best athlete on the roster and a hell of a wrestler, and he picked up, I said this before, aside from Jack Briscoe, I never saw an amateur that picked up pro wrestling as fast as Kurt Angle did, with the exception maybe of Brock Lesnar. Natural athletes, they got it. They understood the philosophies. They still got to learn crowd psychology and so forth. But Kurt picked it up like it was natural, like he'd been doing it all his life. So the only thing I could think of was the fact that there may have been some question marks. How durable is he because of his injuries? Because you're dealing with a guy that had a broken neck. And so that may have been a factor in it. I don't know anything else it could have been, quite frankly. Kurt, like all of us, he made some decisions that weren't always the most logical. We've all done it. I've certainly done it. Said things, done things that I shouldn't have said, shouldn't have done. But that may have been a factor in it. I'll assure you this, Conrad, it had nothing to do with his bell-to-bell abilities. Nothing. Because he was that damn good. When I compare him to Jack Briscoe, that's pretty damn good in my world. But you look at the other guys that came from the amateurs, and Briscoe was a fan, and a big fan of Leroy McGuirk's territory, which is where he broke in. But Lesnar was not a fan. Kurt was not a fan. As best I know, was not a long-term pro wrestling fan. And those two guys just made that, they adapted and they transferred their athletic skills into the pro wrestling genre, and the rest is history in that regard. So I don't really know. That'd be the best answer I can give you. I'm not lying about it. I don't know. I'm not keeping it a secret. I just don't know what else it could have been.
Let's jump into the matches. The Dudleys are going to retain the WWF tag titles in a 4-way over Big Show and Spike Dudley, Lance Storm and Hurricane, and the Hardys. They go 14 minutes and 21 seconds. Meltzer would say Show and Spike make a great visual walking to the ring with the size difference, similar to what WCW had with White and Rey Mysterio and never went anywhere with. Meltzer would say very good opener, but the crowd took it down a notch. They gave it 3.25 stars. So the Dudleys retain. The hot tag pop for the Big Show was huge. And I'm kind of surprised that there wasn't more done with Big Show and Spike after this. Do you know if it was ever even seriously considered?
I don't think it was ever seriously considered, Conrad, because Vince always saw Big Show as Andre, and you only put him in tags when his body was breaking down or he was hurt or sick or not feeling up to par. Big Show was always, when we signed him, he was always looked at as being the next Andre the Giant and would be an attraction guy. Now, to be an attraction wrestler, you cannot be overexposed. And all of a sudden, we hire Paul White, and he becomes a regular. He gets familiar. Andre was always protected. He was never overexposed on television. So he always remained an attraction. And I think that I think that was a miscalculation on everybody's part that had anything to do with it, is that he should have been seen less and should have been seen alone.
It's interesting to think what could have been if they were a tag team, because it was kind of fun for this.
Yeah, it was. And like you said, Rey Mysterio and Big Show had some tag matches, you said, but both Rey and Spike are good hands. Now, Spike Dudley was not in the league of Rey Mysterio, but Spike was never going to hurt you. He's always going to be at the right place at the right time. He's going to sell. He's the littlest person in the match. It made sense in the commentary. It made sense in the audience. But, I just don't think, I think the reason, as I said, was that to get Show out of tags and let him start building his run, and hopefully at some point become the champion and see how he does there with that title.
What do you think of the comment Meltzer made about the crowd hurting it? I've heard Pittsburgh can be a tough crowd. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, that's true. That's challenging. You got to really entertain them, and they need to be invested in something personal. Hence the Angle Austin match.
Right.
They didn't have the emotional investment in that opening match as they should. And also, Conrad, if we upon further review, you'll find out that some of these cats they just started a team. They just got together. this match, I don't say it was just thrown together, but it just didn't have a huge buildup. And the tag titles, God, I don't remember the last time the tag titles in that company meant anything. And it wasn't hot. It wasn't topical. It wasn't what they wanted to see that night. We knew what they wanted to see that night, and it was at the very end of the card, not the beginning.
Well, next up, we've got Perry Saturn pinning Raven in 5 minutes and 7 seconds. Meltzer would say both guys worked hard, but the crowd was totally dead. He would say Raven's in the best shape he's been in years, fast paced, but maybe too fast paced, although it didn't matter because the crowd wasn't going to care anyway. Saturn had his left eye busted open before winning with a spinning fisherman suplex. You know, we've talked a little bit about the Radicals when they first come over and they, have a WWF debut over on Bruce's show, Something to Wrestle. And he felt like Perry Saturn was going to be the breakout star of the group.
Really?
We know that was not the case. Why do you think Perry didn't become a bigger star with the company?
Maybe it's that same thing we talked about Chronic. Perry was a good hand. He's tough. He looked great. Nice guy back in the locker room area. Had a kind of a weird sense of humor, which is cool. Hell, all of us do to some degree. But I don't know. There's a fact that he just didn't connect with the audience. And quite frankly, they may have wanted to see the other Radicals more than they wanted to see him. I thought the breakout star in the Radicals was going to be Benoit or Guerrero.
Yeah.
But you had Dean Malenko. Nobody's better fundamentally sound and so forth than Dean Malenko that I ever saw. That's why he's so valuable as a coach in AEW. He really helps those guys with laying out the matches and so forth. But I just, maybe we didn't give it time. I don't think that Moppy thing got over. It was kind of silly, and it's hard to take seriously. And Saturn to me was always a serious wrestler, dangerous, unpredictable. But all of a sudden he's in love with a mop, and I think that didn't do him any favors.
Yeah, being in love with the mop probably didn't do him any favors.
No, I was just being honest.
It's just funny. What about Raven? I've always wanted to say that on a podcast. What about Raven? Can you tell us?
Well, Scott Levy was a very talented guy and highly intelligent, but sometimes he was his own worst enemy.
Yeah.
And so we get back to that same old topic. People are probably tired of me hearing me talk about is reliability. There was something there that Vince was not sold on. Because remember the backstory of Raven. He was Johnny Polo. He was a broadcaster. He had a lot of starts, stops, and so forth. I think that had an effect on Vince's confidence in Raven and doing well. And he had some bad rap at times on some things, and sometimes he was too outspoken, which he can be. But he was another guy that was a solid hand, and the kind of guys you want on your roster because he can work with anybody. He can work babyface, he can work heel, and he'll make the most out of any match that he's in because he's that smart. But I just, I don't know. Maybe he'd been overexposed. Maybe he'd had too many false starts. I don't know. But the people at that point in time really didn't care.
Let's keep it moving here and talk about the next match. It's just crazy that we had a pay-per-view match about Moppy. Christian and Edge, finally. 3-star match here, according to Meltzer. The Intercontinental Championship is on the line. Christian gets the win in 11 minutes and 53 seconds. Meltzer would say this match and the previous match were very important because they were wrestlers who needed a good performance and even more, a good crowd response to move them up a level. In the Raven Saturn case, just really to get in the game. And for these guys to be taken as serious singles players. In both cases, the work was there, but the crowd reaction hurt everyone's chances. Edge was the next guy to get his eye busted open, his left from an apparent errant punch, and the eye was starting to swell as the match got going. Christian got 2 chairs to tease the concerto, but Edge stopped him. Edge then got the chairs and teased doing it, but the referee pulled the chairs away and stopped him. While this was going on, Christian got a chair and gave Edge the low blow for the pin and the title change. it's pretty crazy that this was 20 years ago. And even now we have Edge and Christian main eventing pay-per-views. Hell, Edge main evented WrestleMania. Pretty good match here though, between two longtime friends.
Yeah, I liked it. They had great chemistry. They knew what the other was going to do. They cooperated. They got along. They were not selfish. All the things you need to have in place to have a great presentation. And those guys knew each other better than anybody else knew them. So I was happy. I was happy to see both in singles matches, because again, your route to wealth and longevity in this era of WWE and pro wrestling in general was not normally through a tag. So that's kind of where we were there, buddy. But I was very happy. I always thought Edge was going to be a breakout star because he connected with the audience. And Jay was always the clear number 2 on that team of Christian. So I was glad they both got their opportunity to grow on their own. But I always thought that that Edge had a little bit of a leg up in that scenario. But that does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that Christian wasn't a very good hand. You know, the match that Christian had with Kenny Omega in AEW was outstanding.
Great. Yes.
Outstanding. He's still a hell of a worker. He's always been a hell of a worker, but he just didn't quite have that connectable charisma that Adam Copeland, aka Edge, had. It's very special, and it's not a knock on Christian whatsoever. Just Adam had a specialness about him, and I'm just really happy that he's back in the game at a schedule he can manage, and so forth, and he take care of his health and so forth and so on. So I was looking forward to this match, and I wasn't disappointed with it. I thought it was a real solid match, and both those guys counted themselves very well.
Next up, we've got Undertaker and Kane. They're going to retain the WCW tag titles over Chronic in 10 minutes and 22 seconds. And buddy, it is not good. Meltzer would say a bad match, which progressively got worse. Slow match with sloppy execution. Adam selling is horrible. And against Undertaker and Kane, it required him to do so. His offense may have been worse than his selling. He spent some time getting heat on the Undertaker to set up a hot tag. After about a minute, Undertaker came in for his own hot tag. He went for a choke slam on Clark first, but Stevie Richards made the save. Didn't matter because moments later, Undertaker choke slammed Clark for the pin, and Kane choke slammed Richards to make the burial complete. -2 stars. And Meltzer would continue. This may have been the worst WWF pay-per-view match between male wrestlers all year, and resulted in the end of Chronic's very brief stay in the WWF. The word we got is that they claim they quit, and one company source says they were dumped, but details weren't confirmed. Other than that, they are gone after just 3 weeks, and they had called up and tried to get rebooked on the late October Russo tour of Australia. The story going around is that Jim Ross told them before the show on Monday and told them that they were going to send them to HWA, and they quit instead. If that story is correct, for wrestlers of their level experience, the idea that they were being sent down is a nice way of hoping that they would quit. Considering the finish, not the pinfall, but the blow off nature, the company had already made their decision before the match. What can you tell us here, Jim?
Well, I think Vince saw their matches and saw the same thing you did. Same thing I did. They just weren't, as a team, they weren't that level. Now, if they had gone down and they could work 3 or 4 days a week as a team, and they really concentrated on getting better as a unit, so they could come back and have matches with 2 7-foot baby faces, Undertaker and Kane, then so be it. But, and if you're a guy in their position and it's kind of unsettling, you can look at it 2 ways. Look, like you said, I'm offended because I'm a veteran. You want me to go back down? Well, we want you to go back down so you can work on your skill sets as a tag team. But at the end of the day, they had not done themselves any favor in previous matches. And even Undertaker's influence was not going to be able to save them. The performance wasn't there. And to be honest with you, that took a lot of the heat off the Undertaker, because in the end of the day, at least from my point of view, that new heel team was not doing Undertaker and Kane any favors.
No.
And so you got to protect Undertaker and Kane. That's what we're trying to do. So you guys either got to get better, or you got to either, get along or move along. And I think that's kind of where we were there on that deal. It wasn't a premeditated thing where, well, we'll do this and then we know they'll quit. I don't think I ever had that conversation with anybody. But it's logical that they're going to have their feathers ruffled. I knew that was going to happen. And they didn't like my information I was giving them. I'm just telling you guys what Vince wants. And he wants you guys to work on your tag team stuff so you can come back and make an impact and make some money.
And what'd they say?
They didn't think they thought they were fine. They didn't need it. They thought they were in good shape. And that's just ego.
Yeah. Is it something that happens in that same sit down where they say, well, if that's what you want us to do, we quit? Or is it something like they say, okay, and then they think about it and get back with you and say, we think we're going to take a pass?
I don't remember exactly the line of dialogue, but I know they weren't pleased and they were offended. And I didn't approach them in a confrontational manner, Conrad. I talked to them like I'm talking to you right now.
Right.
Here's where the boss, the owner of this company, has assessed your team. And I'm going to give you some information you're not going to want to hear. But here's what we need to do to make this work. Right. As it relates to Mr. McMahon giving us a positive decision and you guys getting back together and straightening up your deal, whatever. And so I was honest, but they just, they were offended, and I can understand to some degree why. But, I got orders from headquarters, man. What am I going to do? Oh, Vince, you're wrong on this deal. Those guys are a great team. Well, they weren't a great team at that time. We wanted them to be a great team. And if they were, then you got two great big ass, badass heels that might draw yourself some money. But it just wasn't in the cards.
Next up, Rob Van Dam retains the hardcore title over Chris Jericho in 16 minutes and 33 seconds. Meltzer says the one bright spot is that the audience itself seemed to have decided that Van Dam is the next hot thing. Van Dam seemed to bust Jericho's eye with a kick, and he needed stitches legit. While busted eyes seemed to be the norm for the night, it should be noted how Van Dam is getting a major track record of doing so in recent matches. Finish saw Jericho deliver a hard chair shot to Van Dam's back, went for another, but Stephanie came out and grabbed the chair. Earlier in the show, in the teased sexual tension spot, she said she'd do anything to help Van Dam win. He said he wasn't going to need any help, but she pretty much said she's going to help him anyway. When Jericho turned around after pulling the chair away, he was hit with a Van Daminator and the 5-star frog splash for the pin, and Meltzer dug it and he gave it 4 stars. What'd you think?
Liked it. I liked it. I thought until that point, it was the best match on the show, and Van Dam was getting over, and he did work snug, and he was doing things that were not traditional, especially in certain sequences, but it made him different. It made Rob unique. And some of the things he did had such a small margin for error that those things could happen. If this had been in a different era, earlier era, nobody would have said a word. But you're in a situation or in a time frame that people had, issues with, well, he's too stiff and whatever. I don't know. Look, I know you can be too stiff. I get that. That's just logical. But I'd rather err on the side of aggression and stiffness as to where it doesn't look like you could break an egg on your punches or you lock up like a couple of old senior citizens.
The reputation for Van Dam being a guy who would hurt you, is that something you heard about often?
No, not at all. But it's people bitching.
Right.
Look, he's going to take somebody's spot.
Sure.
And it's going to be at the top of the card. And when you exchange your spot at the top of the card and somebody else takes it, your money's probably going to be affected more often than not. So a lot of guys are going to come up with little, little things like that to downgrade or to pigeonhole Rob in a negative way. Van Dam connected with the audience. Van Dam has and had charisma, and he was a unique dude, and the fans could see how unique he was, and he did some awfully good stuff. That coast to coast he did a few times was breathtaking. His 5-star frog splash was in the Eddie Guerrero league. So I don't know. I thought he was a great get for us and still do. But some of his peers saw they were going to lose maybe a notch on their gun here, and they were more than happy to share with Vince. So if he's dangerous, the boys are not going to want to work with him. I never had one guy, and I would have gotten that conversation. I never had one guy, Conrad, come to me and say, "Hey, JR, we're going to this house show run. Can you not book me with Van Dam because he's too reckless, or he's too dangerous, or whatever?" Not one person came to me and said anything about that. So I know it had to come from the inside, and those little pieces of evidence that left some DNA didn't do Robbie any favors at that time. But I still am a big Rob Van Dam fan. I think he does a hell of a job in anything he does, and I think he'd probably go out and have a match down. That maybe that Toby Keith thing. I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was.
There you go.
I think he could do that. That's how good he is. So, but you have to understand that, and you do. I'm not saying you have to understand, but it's a matter of comprehending and processing the political aspects of that deal. Anybody that came in, why do you think when Goldberg came in, a lot of guys didn't like Goldberg? Well, he's going to get his ass over.
Yes, he is. And
he's going to draw you money, and he's going to take somebody's spot. So all you can do is work harder and get better at your craft, and don't worry about him. Maybe you'll get booked with it.
So you take all that with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Let's go to the next match. We've got Rock retaining the WCW title in a handicap match over Booker T and Shane McMahon that goes 15 minutes and 23 seconds. Meltzer would say good match, but nothing special. Shane didn't do any of the high risk moves he's famous for on pay-per-view. With the high injury rate, they've definitely adopted a more safety oriented product, which is good. Unfortunately, they've weaned a generation of fans who don't care about the health of the performers, and many get bored with a toned down product based more on ring psychology and basic moves. Sort of take a time out there. The match sort of is what it is, but that is worth discussing. Did you feel like at some point, as the stunts, if you will, the volume continued to get raised higher and higher, that you thought this is not sustainable? We've got to temper this.
Yes, absolutely. Because the medical bills came across my desk, and there's always something. Seemingly, that's an exaggeration, but it seemed to be always something.
Right.
My issue is this. I mentioned this term earlier. The margin for error.
Yeah.
It got thinner and thinner to where, just a little bit being off could be a real devastating injury. Guys dropping leg drops in somebody's face, things, taking too big a risk, and they couldn't control. I say that about today's product, all in the business. Guys they feel compelled to do more because they don't think that the audience will settle in to a real wrestling match. Catch as catch can, trading holds, working on the body part, those type things. So, and I guarantee you, if you, in the last several AEW shows, you've seen guys that can go out there and have a wrestling match, and the crowd will still buy it. Darby Allin and CM Punk's match, Punk's first match, I thought was very old school oriented.
Yes. And
I can't comment on because I haven't seen it yet. As we said, we're recording the show early, but I haven't. I'm assuming. My guess is, and of course, I may have egg on my face when I say this because everybody can say, "Well, we saw that match last night, whatever."
Right.
I think Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson. I'll try to get that right someday in my lifetime. And Kenny had a hell of an old school oriented match. That's what I'm thinking they're going to have, because I think they want to prove to people that if done properly and intelligently, and you connect all your dots, that a wrestling match where holds and false finishes and logic are utilized still works. And I believe that. My issue, I'm not mad at the guys that take all the unnecessary chances. I thought, I'll give you an example. That cage match we had here a while back at All Out was between the Bucks and the Lucha Brothers.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And it was a testament to their courage and their passion. I thought it was about as good as anything I'd seen in years. And for that environment, it was a spot thing in a cage. And I've never seen one even come close to being as good as that. So I'm very high on the talents. My only fear is that they're going to hurt themselves by taking those those margin for error situations that are a thin line between it looks great and it feels good, or there's a busted, or there's a cheekbone or a broken nose or teeth gone or whatever. That's what worries me, the health of the talent. I'm not against all those things, but I think that they got to be used in a specific way by talents who are really, really good at that part of the game. And obviously, the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros are as good as I've ever seen in that style of a match. They're just amazing. So, but you still got to worry. I know I talked to everybody involved in that match, and they're still sore.
Yeah.
After all these weeks, they're still sore. Their bodies are sore. And I really admire the Lucha Bros simply because they have been back in the ring since then, and on a pretty regular schedule. And the Bucks have had more time to heal, and they needed it. And that's not knocking either team. It's just what it is. They're humans. So, but we needed, back in the WWE time that we're talking about here, we needed to start utilizing more common sense. And guys are picking up stuff from other promotions and other TV shows, et cetera. And we're going to try to up it because they thought they had to up it to keep up and not look bad. And that's not the case.
Let's talk about the match itself, because The Rock gets the win, but there's a bunch of shenanigans. Nick Patrick is not going to disqualify anybody because Shane told him not to. Bradshaw's going to run out with a baseball bat and chase Test away. Mike Chioda's going to come out as the babyface referee, and when Shane goes to pin The Rock, he pulls Shane off. Chioda and Patrick then start arguing. Booker nails Chioda at one point, but Rock uses a rock bottom on him and has him pinned. Both referees are fighting on the floor. It figured to be a near fall, but Earl Hebner ran out and counted 3. So 3 1/4 stars, but this feels like, as you would say, I think, a lot more sizzle than steak.
Yeah. Well, the goal was to protect Rock. You look at the booking, Conrad, and look at how they worked that match. We had to keep the shine there.
Yeah.
And I believe that that was foremost our biggest responsibility. Is to not take away from Rock. So you had to put him in such unforgettable, seemingly unattainable odds that when he overcomes, the shine's there. He's shining. And I think that's what that was. But I think we went overboard a little bit. I would say that one of the reasons that was booked that way was Pat Patterson. Pat was a major influence on Rock's career. What he did in the ring, why he did it, when he did it, and all those things. Pat's amazing gift for crowd psychology and the art of working a pro wrestling match was something that Rock saw, he felt, and he tapped into. And knowing Pat, he was going to go overboard to make sure that there was plenty of obstacles in Rock's way so that he looked stronger than ever by overcoming the bad guys. So I would say, if you look back at the old formats and stuff, that was Patterson's match, I'm guessing. And because some of the spots in there and some of the things that Rock was doing was very Patterson-esque. And because, here's the deal. When you're in territory like Pat was, he's 14 years, I think, 12 or 14 years in one territory in San Francisco. They worked the same towns on a regular schedule every week. So to stay there 14 years, you've got to be able to adjust and change your game a little bit, change the matchup a little bit, keep telling the same story. You're still going to get to the same destination, but you're going to take different routes to get there. And Pat had that mastered. So I think he used a lot of that experience that he had from the territory days when he was laying out matches, and he was brilliant at it. Brilliant at it. That's a big void for the business not to have enough Pat Pattersons left that can share that knowledge and that wisdom. So, but Pat was sometimes very protective of Dwayne. And at the end of the day, that's probably the smartest thing that we could have done. Could we have done a little bit less? Like I said earlier, I'm not big on all these handicap matches.
Right.
But I understood why we did that. We did that to make sure that Rock left there shining. And I think that was probably what we achieved.
No doubt. Next up, we've got Rhyno winning the U.S. title from Yoshihiro Tajiri in 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Meltzer says, really good. Too short, of course, but with these guys being put on after Rock and people waiting for the main event, there was really no way to get much heat.
No.
And it was best that the match was short. The idea was they're alternating face and heel wins and needed a heel win in between Rock and Austin's match. The finish was clean as a sheet, with Rhyno scoring a pin with the gore. Two guys looking back, really solid wrestlers. Maybe it's their characters. Maybe they're not great on the microphone, but boy, Tajiri's facials and everything about him was just really, really good. Do you think that Rhyno or Tajiri could have been bigger players in this era? Without
a doubt. Especially, and Terry Rhyno is such a swell guy. Solid worker. To me, he was best suited to have the right partner that fit him, and he would have been a great tag team guy. Not that he wasn't a decent singles guy, but I'm just saying maybe his strength would have been as the heater in a tag team. Very athletic and very strong, and
Neidhart type almost.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. But Tajiri was a gem. GEM. I loved his facials. He had a brilliant sense of humor, comedic timing. He had good timing in the ring. He had the other gear you're always looking for. I'm not sure that Rhyno had that extra gear to the degree that Tajiri did. But I thought Tajiri was he was underutilized as much as about anybody during that period of time. Really, really good hand. And those, like I said, those facials were priceless. And the fact that that little angle they did with he and Tori, right? You said?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just so illogical, and I guess I'm probably not politically correct saying that, but they don't seem like a couple you would pick out on the dating game or something,
No, not in in the WWE. You expect, the Rock is with Tori Wilson, right? I mean, that's what you've been conditioned for.
Correct. And but what a performer Tajiri was. Didn't Tajiri have a hell of a match with Bret Hart back in the day?
I think Tajiri's had a hell of a match with everybody he ever wrestled.
He had wonderful chemistry with William Regal.
Oh, phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just money. Every time they were on camera together, they stole the scene. They stole that aspect of the show. So I thought that Regal and Tajiri just had terrific charisma, and I couldn't get enough of those two guys. So yes, both those guys, Rhyno and Tajiri, there was more lower hanging fruit than we gathered up, but especially when it comes to Tajiri. And I guess some of that's just because, Tajiri being Japanese and he really understood things.
Yeah.
And in our culture, that's what I'm trying to say. But boy, what a talented guy he was. And I think back to those days. If you want to see some hard hitting, good wrestling matches, I mean, find something with Tajiri in it, and you'll learn something. If you're a wrestler or a wrestling fan that wants just to get more educated into the process of having a successful match from bell to bell, he was just terrific. I think the reason he left might have been because of his visa issues and things like that. That was a big thing. Of course, here you're talking 9/11, baby. If you ain't American, you ain't American. You don't have a citizenship. the sand is going through the hourglass. It's just a matter of time. You got to go and stay gone for a certain length of time. But I think when he got back to Japan, they saw this son of a bitch is a talent, and he was used a lot. So I don't know. But I'm with you, Conrad. I both those guys could have been bigger stars, especially Tajiri because of the uniqueness of his Japanese heritage and trying to acquire the various American tastes and traditions.
The comedic stuff was off the charts with him.
Timing.
Yeah.
He had natural timing, Conrad, with his comedy. And here's how good he was. He had natural timing with his comedy, and he didn't have a command of an understandable English language.
Yeah.
Facial expressions, that 1 or 2 word answer. Oh, he's priceless. So, and again, my hat's off to, or my visor is off to Regal, because I've said all along that he may be one of the most underutilized, underappreciated talents in the business in the last generation or two. There's nothing Regal can't do well. And, but he took a liking to Jerry and took him under his wing, and off they went, man. It's good stuff.
Now it's time for our main event, an unbelievable match, an unbelievable moment. Kurt Angle, our Olympic hero, our American hero, just a couple of weeks, less than that actually, after 9/11, he's in the main event in his hometown against the biggest heel in the company for the world title, and his family is sitting ringside. All his brothers and his mom, unfortunately his father's passed away, but they pull out all the stops. It's an incredible match. There's blood, a lot of action. They go 23 minutes and 12 seconds. It's a 4-star match. And the entire Angle family and most of the babyface wrestlers hit the ring for the celebration as the show goes off the air. It's unbelievable. When we watched this back with Kurt Angle the other day on the Angle Pod, he got emotional just because of what this match meant to him. And unbelievably, he said that this meant almost as much as the Olympics to him. It was that important.
That's something. That's high praise, man.
I think it might be fitting right now. We don't normally do this, but I'm going to play a little audio so you can hear the end of that match, the reaction, and JR's unbelievable call. This is from the main event of Unforgiven 2001.
Moments ago, but now Angle is, oh my God. And that is sick. Hey, I applaud Kurt Angle for a great challenge, but it's over. 1, 2, good night. No! No, it's not. No. This fight's going to continue. What the hell does it take to put Kurt Angle away? I think Austin's asking himself that same question. And now Austin hammering at the back, trying to weaken those back muscles, right up to the neck of Kurt Angle. And now Austin screaming at Angle to get up. And now maybe Austin. Hey, now maybe he's going to use the Stone Cold Stunner. I've seen this position on so many occasions. Here it comes, the Stone Cold Stunner. There's no hesitation here. Hit him with the seam. Angle, he's got it. He's got it. We're our new champion. Angle's got the ankle up. He's going for the rope. There's nowhere for Austin to go. Austin down for the rope. Austin, tap it out.
on your shit, were you not?
Yeah, I guess. I hate my work, but that wasn't too bad.
You hate your work, dude. That was unbelievable.
Well, I appreciate it. Hey, here's the thing. People, I get this a lot. Somebody would sue me. I got a tweet just before we recorded this. They said, "Well, it sounds like you're having fun again lately. The work I've done lately on AEW." People have to understand that every match can't have that. Every match is not going to get that call,
right?
Because it's the wrong setup. It's not. In other words, I've always said, Connie, you and I've talked about this off camera. It's they got to make the music.
Yeah.
The wrestlers got to make the music. And I'll do my damnedest to put together a great lyric with the right tone and inflection. But they got to start the process by making the music and setting the stage and putting it all in place. So every call can't, could I go crazy on every call? I could, if it's warranted.
Yeah.
If it's merited. So I haven't lost my passion. That same passion that you heard there, I got now. It's just, what do you hear? What do you see? What kind of music are you guys giving us? Are you giving us the right sort of music that we can go there and it not be obsolete and not be ridiculously out of place?
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, JR, shit, you can't get everything over. Stop." So that's kind of where I am on that deal. But that was a good call. And to Heyman's credit, he laid out, "Let me do my business."
Let me contextualize what you said too. I don't think we can stress this enough. This was 12 days after 9/11 in Kurt Angle's hometown. His father, he was our Olympic hero. His mom's at ringside. His father's passed away. This is a perfect storm for you to be over the top.
Yeah, I think so.
My goodness, were you like, even you listening to your own stuff, when he mentioned his dad, we were both like, woof.
Yeah.
And we say he, but that's you. And man, it was remarkable. And
thank you.
They had some good music, but boy, you had some great lyrics, a 4-star match. And as the story goes, this wasn't even supposed to happen. This wasn't the original plan. Austin was supposed to retain, but on the heels of 9/11, the decision is made. Let's put the belt on Angle. Again, we get back on track. He holds the belt not too terribly long. I mean, a couple of weeks and he's done. But my goodness, the idea that you called the audible and had this feel good moment in his hometown.
Yeah.
Think about if it went the other way on the heels of 9/11. Well, the American hero loses in his hometown.
Right.
You can't do that.
No.
God, it was just fantastic. And I know you haven't had a chance to listen to the Kurt Angle show where we talk about this, because as you and I are recording, it dropped this morning. But when I talked to Kurt about this match and we watched it back, we did a watch along, he got emotional. It's the first time I've seen that from Kurt Angle, where when he saw his mom, who unfortunately is no longer with us, it brought him right back.
Oh.
How proud he was that she was there and how proud she was of him. And what a big moment this was. And, listen, you and I have a lot of fun on this show when we say things like, "Oh, the belt's just a prop and all it's
cash." I know.
But in the moment, there's real emotion. You could hear it in your voice and he could see it in his mom's face. And it's those moments that make us keep coming back to this silly shit.
You're right. That's the intangible that when you talk about your job to people that are not fans, they have a hard time understanding how you can get passionate about a fake pro wrestling match.
Yeah.
And I don't have the vocabulary and the patience, quite frankly, to explain it to them. I don't know if I have the knowledge to explain it to them. It's a feel thing. It's like you feeling Alabama football.
Right.
You grew up with it. It's a part of your life. It reminds you of happy moments with your family, especially your dad.
Yeah.
I went to the OU Nebraska game and got a cap, signed by Barry Switzer, not bad. And I thought about my father on that game because my dad was a workaholic. And he had a job outside our farm, but when he wasn't working, we were working at home. But the exception was Christmas Day and the OU Nebraska game. So we would take a break. I love that for that reason, because I was a lazy little shit, I guess. And but also remember that at halftime of those games, is it wasn't bitterly cold in November in Oklahoma at that point in time, Dad would go out and play catch with me. And we rarely ever did that. It wasn't a thing we did a day or two a week. I never caught a pass in a game in my life. Well, my dad would humor me he knew I wanted to touch the football, be with him. So that's what those are the moments, the things that draw you to what you love. And I still love wrestling, and I still love those great matches. And when I look at this roster, I thought that the Attitude Era roster, Conrad, was about as good as any roster anybody ever put together.
Yeah,
I really do. But boy, we're coming into an age here now in AEW where our roster is going to rival any roster ever in televised pro wrestling. So a lot to look forward to in that regard. But it's all a feel thing, man. How's your passion? How do you get that passion? Well, you get it by loving something that much. And I've heard a lot of guys say, well, wrestling's always been my mistress. Or the guy said, well, I got out of the business because the business didn't love me back. And I don't know how to help you on that deal. Me having, my track record with relationships ain't the greatest in the world. So I don't know how to help you on that deal. But I can tell you that even better days are on the way as far as roster's concerned. But the Angle situation, that was a perfect storm. That was the night that we needed to do that. And for Vince to beat Steve for the title on pay-per-view, it took a special way of thinking and looking at it. And Vince made the right call. And Steve had no issue doing business. Why would he? Had no issue whatsoever. So if everything, that soundbite at the end made the whole show worth it to me. We could talk about the Chronic and Rhyno and Tajiri, all that stuff all we want. But when you get to Austin and Angle for the title, going on last in essentially a sold out facility, that's about as good as you're going to get it.
A phenomenal show. I hope everybody goes back and watches it and just can sort of transport themselves in their mind and in their hearts to this very special show from 2001, just a few days after 9/11. What a moment for Kurt Angle, the Angle family, and WWE, and hell, even America. It was a cool show, and I'm glad we got to talk about it today, Jim. And
me too.
As soon as you and I get finished talking today, I'm going to go turn on the grill.
Yes, sir.
And plop down in front of the TV, enjoy a little football. You and I are loving that football season is back, and that means one thing: grilling every weekend. And I'm doing that thanks to jrsbbq.com. He's got your hookup on Main Event mustard, Chipotle ketchup. Of course, we've also got the legendary sauce it, baby. But a now non-negotiable that even Mrs. Thompson is sold on is the all-purpose seasoning. We're using it on everything, Jim. I mean, literally, if it goes on the grill, and hell, she's using it on stuff that doesn't. She put it on broccoli the other day. JR's all-purpose seasoning is legit. It's not a gimmick. It's not a novelty for a shelf. I get it. It's got your favorite announcer's face on it. Try the shit. You will reorder it. You will love it. Non-wrestling fans. My mom does not watch wrestling. She uses JR's all-purpose seasoning, and you can pick it up at jrsbbq.com.
God bless her. She needs a big old JR hug for that. I can tell you that right now. Well, and by the way, your mom made that one Christmas. I got the cornbread dressing from her.
Absolutely.
You remember that?
I do.
I cried when I got that package. I cried with the damnest things. He cried over cornbread dressing. Yeah. And I was not even drunk or nothing. I wasn't a drunk crier. But we appreciate everybody's business. And, every time we get an order, I think of Jan a little bit, because this whole thing was her vision. And, she put hours and hours in refining these products, and the little success that we're having. And I think of her and how proud she would have been of what people support, how they're supporting us. And, Stephen Link runs that site and the barbecue business for us. And he's always got the sales, flash sales, and hits them on Twitter. I'm at JRSBBQ. I think my Twitter handle, or Twitter for the barbecue thing is JR's Comfort Food or something like that. You'll find it, folks. I know you will. So if you're going to tweet me about my squeaky chair, which by the way, I'm rocking.
Hey, you're rocking and it sounds great, Daddy. Keep up the good work.
I'm rocking, baby. So it's all good. And, but Conrad, thanks. I appreciate you plugging the site. I know you use our products, and I can't tell you how grateful I am that you do. And you know, like I said, folks, it costs nothing to look, and you're going to be surprised sometimes when you go onto the site. You got to click this, drag that. You know, you got to put your Social Security number, your ATM number, nothing. It's really easy. That we have a sale going on. We had one just the other day. We had 30% off everything.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of good stuff. So just check out the site indiscriminately when you want, and you'll find you're probably going to save yourself some money. And we appreciate your business. That's the main thing. We really appreciate your business. Somebody sent out a tweet the other day, Connie, that said, I ordered my JRs on Monday and I had it in my kitchen on Thursday.
Unbelievable.
So we try to do right. And so we're going to do right by you folks. We thank you for that. Did you, I know you've been busier than a fruit merchant. Paul Boutwell and I did a watch along of a UWF show.
Unbelievable feedback so far over at adfreeshows.com. Mr. Paul Bromwell sat down with Jim Ross and actually watched an old UWF show and did alternate commentary. And Jim, I think the show was only supposed to be an hour, but y'all had such a rhythm and enjoyed talking about the good old days so much. It wound up being a 2-hour bonus show, right?
Yeah, it was fun as hell. And the thing that, Paul picked out the show. I had nothing to do with the selection of the show, so I can't take any credit for that. But it had a main event started early in the hour between Dr. Death and Terry Gordy for the UWF title. And we had standby matches. And it was just to see Doc and Gordy in their prime, young, big, strong, and they had that Japanese reputation going for them. And, they both love Cowboy because he taught them both a lot. Cowboy always said athletic big men make you money. And those guys, if you haven't seen a Doc Gordy match, check this out. And it's one of those things that's kind of a throwback to, they told a story, but there wasn't one Hurricane Rana or one Tope Suicida on the whole show. I don't know how we did it. I'm being a dick. I'm sorry. But it's amazing. And I did commentary on that show with Michael Hayes and Danny Hodge did one match, and our old pal Brucey. Bruce Pritchard did color on the last match of the show. Did a nice job without question. And so it was all good stuff, man. So if you get a chance to listen to that, if you're a member and you're a top guy, as this phrase goes, check that out, because the matches on the show are phenomenal. I'm not saying how great Paul and I were. Paul does a hell of a job, but the matches are really, really good. Michael Hayes and Iceman King Parsons had a really strong match, but nothing trumped Austin, Dr. Death, and Terry Gordy. It was priceless. So check that out. I think you'd be happy that you did, which I love doing those. I'd like to do more of them.
Hey, and don't forget, this Friday night, the Grand Slam continues. It wasn't just a big 2-hour show last night on Dynamite. It's a big 2-hour show this Friday night.
Right.
I was talking about it with Eric Bischoff earlier this morning, and I said, man, it's like pay-per-view level. And then I realized as I'm recording with you, well, I can't say that. I should say restaurant quality, folks.
Yeah.
This Friday night, check it out. Don't you dare miss it. It's still going to be one of the coolest looking venues you've ever seen, Arthur Ashe Stadium. Yeah. First time I think wrestling's ever happened there, and an unbelievable roster, banging out one pay-per-view match after another. And you never know when you might see old JR pop up. But of course, Wednesday nights on Dynamite. Last night, we appreciate you guys watching. Hope you'll watch next week, and hope you'll join us again here next Thursday for Grillin' JR. I'm calling an audible. We were originally going to watch an old Raw from 1996. Instead, we're going to talk a little Chris Jericho action next week here, Jim. That should be fun.
Yeah, he's continues to reinvent himself. Chris, he's got courage, and he's got confidence in his own abilities, and he keeps getting better. He's 50. You wouldn't know it by watching him work. He's a smarter worker than he's ever been. You know, I can almost walk you through all the steps when Jerry Briscoe and by the way, the Briscoe podcast has been very well received. I love talking about Jerry, and he contributes so much to our business and my life and so forth. So if you haven't caught that show, hope you'll take time to check it out. But Chrissy's amazing. I've said from the beginning, and I stand by what I said. I believe Chris Jericho is the MVP of AEW, and because his continuity and his consistency has been main event level, no matter what he does, and he'll be on the call with Chris Jericho Friday night for that 2-hour rampage, one of the broadcasters. So, and they're giving Ricky Starks a shot at learning that trade. So a lot of good things are developing and ongoing here, but I got plenty to talk about with Chris Jericho. I even walked in when he had we'll talk about this, when he wouldn't let go of a front face lock in the locker room with Bill Goldberg. That was a nice story. So, and it was funny too. All the guys are standing around. Nobody wanted to break it up. Of course, you know, because we're men. God damn it. We're men. We're going to fight to the death in the locker room. Really? You know, so I had some choice words for those lads on that day. Can you imagine both of them getting in a fight and then one or the other getting hurt?
No.
Vince would go crazy.
Absolutely.
That was like the time that we're in South Dakota where the hell we were, and Kurt and Lesnar had their little amateur go. And boy, did I get my ass chewed out for that. Like I booked it. I didn't book it, Vince. Well, you should have been out there. It's 2:00 in the afternoon.
Right.
But that was a famous day. But anyway, Jericho next week. I love the audible. We're going to score a touchdown with the game plan. I promise you.
Well, stay tuned, folks. Lots of Grilling JR coming your way next week, talking about all things Chris Jericho right here on Cumulus Podcast. It's every Thursday. It's Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
We thank you folks very much for your support and your business. Business is picking up, as you know, and we'll always be grateful. So have a great week. Take care of each other. And Conrad, you're the best.
Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
So long, everybody.
So long, everybody.